Good evening. Royal officials have insisted that Prince Charles remains politically neutral following a report that he's strongly criticised government plans to send some asylum seekers to Rwanda in Central Africa. An unnamed source told the Times newspaper that Prince Charles has described the policy as appalling and said he was more than disappointed by it. The first flight carrying asylum seekers to Rwanda is due to leave on Tuesday. Our royal correspondent Nicholas Witchell reports.
As Prince of Wales, his interventions over the years have led to accusations of meddling. Charles is now moving ever closer to the throne. So this morning's headlines suggesting he's taken a stand on the highly sensitive political issue of the government's refugee policy are potentially problematic. 10,000 migrants have arrived in Britain in small boats so far this year. The Prince is said to have described the government's plan to send some to Rwanda as appalling. Charles's comments are said to have been made in private conversations. They haven't been denied. The timing of the alleged remarks is particularly sensitive. Yesterday, the High Court refused to grant an injunction barring the first deportations, which are due to take place on Tuesday. Those opposed to the policy applauded the Prince's alleged comments.
Well, we very much welcome what Prince Charles seems to have said. This policy is wrong, we believe it's unlawful, and it is morally indefensible.
The Home Secretary has set great store by the deportation policy. She launched it in Rwanda earlier this year. The government says it will act as a deterrent. Conservatives say Charles's alleged comments are misguided.
He's entitled to his view, as is anyone else. But a number of the views that have been made about Rwanda seem to be on the basis of a lack of information about what this programme and what migrants' experience has been like in Rwanda.
And what of Charles? Clarence House says he's politically neutral. 4 years ago, he was asked if his tendency to intervene would continue when he was king.
No, it won't. I'm not that stupid. I do realise that it is a separate exercise being sovereign.
In 10 days, Charles will be in Rwanda to represent the Queen at the Commonwealth Heads of Government Conference. The Prime Minister will also be there. It promises to be an interesting conversation. Nicholas Witchell, BBC News.
Police in Brazil searching for a missing British journalist and his Brazilian colleagues say they found what may be human remains in a river close to where the men were last seen. Dom Phillips and Bruno Pereira went missing in the Amazon rainforest last weekend. Our South America correspondent Katie Watson has sent this report.
Dom Phillips and Bruno Pereira are experts in their field. One, an established journalist writing a book on saving the Amazon. It was the reason for taking this trip. His travel companion, a renowned expert on Indigenous affairs. Bruno knows these communities well, but also has his enemies and had been threatened in the past for his work in trying to protect communities from illegal mining and fishing. On Friday, there was a significant breakthrough. Material found in the river not far from here that could be human remains. The authorities are also examining traces of blood on a boat belonging to a suspect, and police have visited the families of the missing men to collect DNA samples. Hope might be fading, but families are doing everything they can to find their loved ones. Today we joined the military teams as they headed to the main search area, deep in the Javari Valley. Its sheer beauty masks the conflict found in these forests, and it was along these rivers the two men were threatened again, just before they disappeared.
This is an area of the Amazon where there's so little state presence and everybody involved in the search is having to be flown in.
The news of the missing pair has gained worldwide attention.
We urge Brazilian authorities to redouble their efforts to find Phillips and Pereira, with time of the essence in view of the real risks to their life and security. It is therefore crucial that the authorities at the federal and local levels react robustly and expeditiously.
That's a call that's been echoed by Mr. Phillips' sister in London. She called for an in-depth and open investigation into what's happened. Katie Watson, BBC News, in Valley du Javari.
Demonstrations are taking place across the United States calling for tougher gun control. It follows the recent mass shooting at an elementary school in Uvalde in Texas, where 19 children and 2 teachers were killed. Our correspondent Barbara Pletasher is in Washington for us. And Barbara, feelings running high over this issue.
Yes, there's hope that there could be momentum for action. That's the theme here. This time will be different. But I tell you, Rita, just a few minutes ago, it didn't feel different at all. People around me started to run in panic. Wasn't clear why. It seems there might have been a stunt pulled by someone pretending to carry out some kind of attack. But it just shows you how much of a fear, how much of a reality this is for people here. And that's why they are marching here in Washington and around the country, demanding that Congress act on gun controls, despite the strong opposition from the gun lobby and from Republican politicians. Those mass shootings recently has put this back into the national focus. National attention is on it. And there is a small effort in Congress, senators from both parties who are trying to come up with a modest proposal that might serve as a compromise. Nowhere near what people here are asking for, but maybe that can break through the paralysis and people here will keep pushing.
Thank you very much. Barbara Pletasher reporting for us from Washington. The Cabinet Office Minister Heather Wheeler has apologised after describing Birmingham and Blackpool as god-awful places. The Conservative MP made the remark at a conference in London as she launched the government's new digital strategy. She apologised for any offence caused and said it didn't reflect her actual views. Tributes have been paid to a father and son from Crewe who were killed in a crash during racing at the Isle of Man TT. Roger and Bradley Stockton, who were 56 and 21, died during a sidecar race yesterday. 5 riders have now been killed at this year's event. Campaign groups have accused the government of failing to deliver on its promise of a new food strategy for England. A leak of its plans suggests there will be no new tax on salt and sugar in processed foods. Our political reporter Tony Bonsignori has more details.
The environmental impact of intensive farming methods and the role of processed food in contributing to obesity have all become hot political topics in recent years. In 2018, the government commissioned a major review into the whole food chain. It recommended a tax on sugar and salt, reducing meat and dairy consumption and expanding free school meals. But a leaked copy of the government's long-awaited response suggests many of those recommendations won't be accepted. The white paper instead talks more generally about initiatives to boost health, sustainability and accessibility of diets. And on food prices, the government simply says it will engage closely with the food industry to understand price impacts. And one of the few new practical suggestions is to increase the use of responsibly sourced wild venison. The government is expected to say its plans will promote healthier diets. Many Conservative MPs, though, are likely to welcome the decision to drop the idea of a tax on sugar and salt, particularly given the cost of living crisis. But campaigners who want tougher measures on obesity and sustainability are disappointed.
There was no government intervention in diets. They're just accepting the status quo, these unsustainable dietary patterns, which we know need to change, and the government has a role in that.
Labour is accusing the government of dither and delay, and a former deputy leader who lost 8 stone after cutting out sugar and processed food says ministers should act now, despite the cost of living crisis.
I can see the concern. I mean, anyone would be worried about the cost of living crisis, but given that the products with the high sugar make us more unhealthy and are not good for the family shopping bag in general, I think it's probably a deficit, a fake argument to say this is all about cost of living.
MPs will have much to digest when the long-awaited white paper arrives on Monday. Tony Bonsignori, BBC News.
Football now, and Scotland have been beaten by the Republic of Ireland in their latest Nations League match in Dublin. Michael Obafemi scored the pick of the home side's goals in a 3-0 victory, their first win in a competitive match at home for 3 years. The result leaves Scotland third in their group. England and Wales both have games this evening. And England's cricketers are in a precarious position after day 2 of the second test against New Zealand at Trent Bridge. The tourists scored a huge 553, with Daryl Mitchell dropped twice before he made 190. England lost a wicket early in their reply, with Zach Crawley out for just 4, but Ollie Pope has made a half-century and they closed on 90 for 1. Well, there's more throughout the evening on the BBC News channel. We are back with the late news at 10. Now on BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. Bye-bye.